Hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. Today I'm talking to Bronner Allen. But before we get to Bronner and his story, I just want to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors. During my 29 years in corrections, I've used or supervised PEPPERBALL hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for PEPPERBALL, I get to teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of the PEPPERBALL system. PEPPERBALL is always the first option in my correctional toolbox because I can quickly go from area saturation to direct impact with the non-lethal PAVA projectiles. And with impact ranges of 0 to 150 feet, PEPPERBALL is perfect for cell extractions or fights on the rec yard. To learn more about PEPPERBALL, go to www.pepperball.com or click the link below in today's show information guide. Hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. Before we get started today, I just want to point out that if you have not yet, go back and listen to episode 73, All I Know is Corrections, my interview with Bronner Allen. This is episode 74, When Stress Tries to Kill You, and this is the second part of the interview that I had with Bronner Allen. Now, if you're going to watch this today, I just want to make you aware that we are going to discuss some tough topics. We're going to discuss suicide and depression and, how that affected Bronner. I thank him for being so honest, and I think this will really help a lot of people to hear his story and how he got through it with the support of the people around him. I do want to note that if you are thinking about suicide, or if anyone that you know is thinking about suicide, there is a national suicide hotline now, and that number is 988. So if you know of somebody, or if you're thinking of suicide yourself, please reach out and call that number and get some help. We've had too many correctional officer suicides in this country, not only recently, but over many, many years. It's something that has affected us at work and affects us today. But let's get on with part 2 of the Bronner Allen interview. Thank you.
But I knew what I was doing when I got to Pollock, and then it started. It was
So tell me about Pollock, because for those of you that don't know, Pollock was, it was off the hook for years. When they opened up, they filled it with a lot of inmates that were very tough to control. You guys had escapes down there. You had big fights. Tell me about some of it and what you saw while you were there.
My first day, actually it was kind of like, my house hunt trip. I got down there and I saw pictures of Pollock. I saw pictures of Alexandria, where I stayed at in Louisiana. And I'm like, oh man, this is nice. This is nice. And I get off the plane at the airport, and I walk out of the terminal to where, I could see Alexandria. And I'm like going, oh my God, this is not what the pictures look like. So I checked into my hotel, and remember I said, I'm a big Alabama fan, and I got the name Bama.
Yeah.
And I went to this restaurant, chicken wing restaurant, and they wanted to serve me ice water because I had an Alabama shirt on. They were saying, this is LSU country, get prepared. So I'm like, oh man, I'm not even going to like this place. And I ain't even made it to the institution yet. And so I go back to the hotel, and I probably used 5 cans of spray starch on my uniform to make sure that this thing was immaculate. And I get there, and I walk around the USP, and I saw the fences lined up. I'm like going, man, these are like cages on the outside, And that's what it looked like. It looked like our rec cages when you walk out in the yard, because Pollock was so bad that, they had actually put fences up to separate the inmates, the housing units. So you had A, a B, and a C. So the C yard was like the softball field, and then the B yard was your basketball courts and your handball courts. Then the A yard was the soccer field, and they would swap them. So A would have to walk to another fence to get to B. B would walk on another side, down another sidewalk, get to A, or whatever they were going that day. But I was like going, man, you guys got kind of like segregated this whole place. And luckily that first day, that was making my house strip, nothing happened. It was quiet. I walked around with a lieutenant, and I actually can't even remember his name, their first lieutenant. Because I don't even think he was there when I got back. And so I walked around, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I met, Warden Sherrod. And that was an experience right there. we talk about top wardens. He was kind of like, near the bottom there, but
Mm-hmm.
not saying anything bad about him. But I just you get that particular taste of people. But then I went to the FCI and I walked around the FCI with Lieutenant Hayes, and Hayes was a great guy. He retired also, and
Mm-hmm.
we walked around. And I remember walking into one of the units, and the officer was on the phone. He's like going, "Hey, I think a lieutenant's here." I'm kind of looking down at my bars and my shirt. I'm like going, "Yeah, I think that's what I am."
I think I am.
And I told him, I said, "Are you going to get off that phone?" He's like this. He's, "Yeah, hold on a minute." And he hangs up the phone, and I'm like going, "So, how's your unit look?" He actually put his hands on the desk, looked around, outside his little vestibule, and goes, "It looks pretty good." And I'm like going, "No, man, I need you to get up. We're going to walk around the unit."
Yeah.
So we walked around the unit, and he was like right in my pocket. And so we get back, and I tell Hayes, I say, "Look, man, I think this officer is scared."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like this. He says, "Yeah." He says, "I think it's going to be just a couple days, and he's going to be gone." And it sure was. It wasn't for him. He was scared. He actually almost locked the door after I left.
Yeah.
But it seemed like, you know what, this seems all right. I think I'm gonna be good
Yeah.
here.
Right.
So then I go back home and I get everything packed up and move the pollock. And my first day, I get there at about 5 o'clock in the morning. Shift starts at 6, and the
Mm-hmm.
lieutenant's upset at me because I'm there early. I'm like going, "Hey, I'm here to do my get my detail censuses and all that stuff done. I like to get here early." He's like, "Well, I'm not paying you. I'm gonna clock you in at 5:45." I said, "Man, you do whatever you want to do."
Right.
Bobby Ventura, and so Bobby was one of those guys that he would get mad, and then 10 minutes later he'd come and apologize to you. So I did all my detail census, and another great officer, Nicholas Tate. He's a lieutenant now at Pollock,
Mm-hmm.
and Tate comes in. He says, "Hey, oh, you're the new lieutenant." I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Lieutenant Allen." He's like, "Oh, I'm Officer Tate." He said, "You ready to do mainline, sir?" I said, "Yeah." So I start to walk out with him, and he says, "Hey, you got to get the meal rotation." For those that don't know what meal rotation is, you don't call everybody at one time. You call like A1 or A2, let them get in there, eat, then call the next couple, and you just keep rotating. Once all A's out back in the unit, then you call the B, unit, because you never want all those in at the same time.
Sure.
So I asked Bobby, I said, "Hey, man," I said, "you got a meal rotation sheet?" He says, "Oh, just let me stop doing what I'm doing so I can get your meal rotation sheet." I'm like, "Calm down." But he was using some profound words. So I was like going, "Man, you cuss at me one more time. One more time." So he gives me the sheet. I said, "Thank you." And he's like this. He says, "Aren't you going to make me a effing copy?" I'm like, "That's it." I told Jay, I said, "Step out a minute." And I told him, I said, "Look, man," I said, "this is my first day. It could be my last day." I said, "This don't mean nothing to me." I said, "You ever cuss at me again, so I'm going to punch you dead in your mouth." And I said, "I'm going to make your copies for you." So I made the copies for him. And he said, "All right." And Tate's like going, "Give it 5 minutes, 5 minutes." I'm like, "What is 5 minutes?" And I'm mad now. I'm upset. I said, "I can't believe this lieutenant told me the way he did." And he comes in there. He says, "Hey," he says, "Lieutenant Allen," he says, let's start over. I'm Lieutenant Ventura." He says, "I'm really sorry about what I said in there." He says, That's wrong of me." And I said, "Man, it's okay. It's okay." So he's, "All right, well, if you need anything, just let me know." And he leaves me in mainline. And so we finished mainline. I actually do all my detail census, which takes me about an hour or so. And I'm hot now. So I go back and I get a Dr. Pepper out of the machine. And as I open it up, the Dr. Pepper spores all over my uniform. And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, my first day." I said, "Now I got soda all over my uniform." And luckily, all that spray starch that I put on my shirt, it just kind of repelled the Dr. Pepper. So I'm like going, "All right." Well, as I'm in the bathroom, they call a body alarm in a Bravo unit. Well, I take off running across this yard. And I mean, I was in good condition, I thought. And everybody's like running at a jog pace. And I'm just full speed. And they're all yelling at me, "Slow down, Lieutenant, slow down." I'm like going, "It's a body alarm. It's a body alarm." And I hit those steps. And I could not go up the steps. People were passing me, saying, "Told you, slow down." I'm like, holy crap, I can't move my legs. And
Right.
I get up there, and inmate hit an officer, and then the officer hit the inmate. That was it. And so we
Right.
cuffed him up, and we're taking him down the back stairwell, and this inmate bites me in the thigh. And I'm like going, oh my God. So my first day, I get yelled at by a lieutenant, cussed at. I get sold all my uniform, and I get assaulted by an inmate. The very first day, I'm like going, man, I don't think I'm going to like this. And then
Welcome to
the
Pollock.
next day, yeah, the next day, I'm like going, okay, I'm going to give it another day, just one more day, see how it goes. And
Right.
Warden Sherrod met me in the parking lot, and we were talking about, he said, hey, so how was your first day? I heard you got assaulted. You all right? I said, yes, I got a little bit of, redness where the inmate's teeth are still, showing on my thigh. And he's like, oh, I hate that happened to you. So he's like, I got something to show you. And I said, all right. So we go in his office, well, the warden's briefing room, and they got all these monitors. I actually never even been in the warden's briefing room. And
Sure.
there's cameras everywhere, and monitors, and you see everywhere the whole institution. He's like, I want you to sit down a minute. I want you to look at something. He says, you're a GS9 lieutenant. You've never been here before. He says, so that means you got fresh eyes. That's why I hired you. Fresh eyes. I'm like going, okay.
Cool.
So we sit down, and I'm looking at these monitors, and he's like, look at this one right here. And we're looking at Unicor, and staff are standing there with their hands in their pockets. And inmates are walking through the metal detector. Lights are going off. Inmates are taking their bags. They're walking around the metal detector. He says, what do you see here? And I'm thinking to myself going, okay, you're a lieutenant now. You're not an officer. You go ahead and say something. Because I was thinking that officer mentality going, man, I ain't telling you nothing.
Right.
I said, well, sir, I see the lights going off. So that means they have metal. He's like, that's exactly what they have. He said, them officers ain't doing anything about it. He said, I need you to go over and correct that. And I'm like going, right now?
Yeah.
He says, yeah, right now. I said, I'm only a 9 lieutenant, right? He says, you're going to be an 8 officer back at Butner if you don't do what I tell you to do. And I'm like going, I said, all right. So I walk over there, and the door opens up, and there's 3 Hispanic inmates coming out. I'm like, hey, where y'all going? And they're like going, oh, we're going back to the unit. We're just waiting on a buddy. And at first I'm thinking in my head going, you should be coming out this door.
Right.
And then I'm thinking going, well, I said, maybe I don't know. Maybe there is a movement called, and you guys are going back to unit. But, I'm like, I'm not sure. And all of a sudden, another inmate comes out, and they pull out knives, and they start stabbing this boy. And I didn't know what to do. I actually I stood there for a minute going, oh, my God, what just happened? Yeah. And finally, I was like, going, hey, I need help. Staff needs assistance. Inmates fighting, and I'm trying to get as much detail. I got 3 Hispanic inmates. They got weapons. They're stabbing another inmate. And I mean, just going on and on. And they get there, and they lay their knives down, and inmate lived. I thought he was for sure dead, but he ended up living. Yeah. And they took him away, and I'm like going, oh, my God, this is my first day here. And already seen, a huge, horrific stabbing. And then all day long, it seemed like, we got a buy alarm, staff needs assistance. It just kept going on and on and on. And I'm like going, this is crazy. Yeah. What I get myself into? And so after it was all over, it was about lunchtime. One lieutenant came back, and they were like going, you all right? I said, yeah, so I'm good. They said, you look kind of, flustered or, wondering what you think you got yourself into. And I said, I really don't. And he was like going, he says, it's going to be all right. Yeah. You just got to go with the flow. Just come in here with a strong mind, a strong head. He says, take care of your staff. Make sure they go home. I said, well, hell, I want to make sure I go home too. He says, take care of your staff and you'll go home. Right. I said, all right. I said, I'll do that. And they're like, then they're like, you're from Butner? I said, yeah. They said, we got another lieutenant here from Butner. And I said, who's that? They said, Glenn McDonald. He's off. He's been off the last couple of days. He'll be here tomorrow. He'll be your operations lieutenant tomorrow. Right. I said, man, I know Glenn, which I only knew Glenn kind of real fast. I mean, I watched your podcast, with him, and he talked about, Warden Johns and some other things. And I really did not know all about Glenn until watching your podcast. But I
Yeah.
knew that he had a lot of experience when it came to the disturbance control team. And I was the gear officer. I issued all the equipment to everybody. And I remember Randy Jones called me up, and saying, this is why we're at Butner now. And I think Glenn was a food service foreman over at the low security.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Randy called me up and said, hey, I'm going to get you relieved. I got an officer, Glenn McDonald. He's going to meet you at the DCT building, issue him some equipment. He's going to be a new team member. So I was like, all right, cool. So I go over there, and me and Glenn talked for probably about half hour while I was issuing him his gear. And he was telling me about all his experience with disturbance control and him being in the Marine Corps. And I thought, man, this guy's freaking awesome, And then I really didn't see Glenn again, because he never made it to the training, because I guess that's when him and Warden Johns got into it, and he got off the team.
Right.
So I was like, shit. But I was excited to see Glenn when, he came up. And so that next morning, we actually had breakfast together. And then we came into the institution. He actually came in early. And it seemed like, he set me his expectations, what he wanted me to do.
Right.
I'm like going, okay, wait a minute, hold on. But I was like going, hey, he said, I will teach you to be the best lieutenant the Bureau can have. He said, if you listen to me. And I'm like going, all right, I will. And I made that promise, and I did pretty good. And then we had he talked about, another officer, another lieutenant, oh man, Fitzgerald. Yeah, Fitzgerald. And he was my relieving activities lieutenant. He came at 2:00. And it was instant reports after instant reports. I'd have them stacked up like this tall. And I'd have to do all these instant reports. Glenn made me do all those instant reports before I left. He said, you need to put all those in before you leave, because you're not going to leave him with all this stuff. Well, then me and Glenn argued a few bit, and things got kind of, strayed, and me and Glenn didn't talk that much anymore. It was kind of like, two bulls going at it, but I learned a lot from Glenn. Go ahead.
Was lieutenant's office, I mean, you talk like, was anybody getting along in the lieutenant's office, or was just the stress of it keeping you guys wound up? Or
I think the stress, Glenn would always be telling me to be ready. And I think, looking at it today, looking back at my career, I think Glenn was more like trying to say, I'm trying to get you prepared. I'm trying to make sure you have all your stuff done. So that way, if something does happen, your stuff's done. You don't have to worry about coming back and trying to play catch up.
Right.
But I think it's how he told me to do it. It's like going, dude, man, why don't you ask me or kind of sit down? But then you're with Glenn. If Glenn's listening right now, Glenn's probably going, look, I'm not going to, superficial anything. What do you want me to hold your hand and tell you, hey, Lieutenant Allen, this is what I want you to do.
Right.
So I think that's what Glenn was trying to do. He was trying to say, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to listen to me. And I think he was trying to be stern to me this whole time, saying that, okay, if I try to talk to you in a normal voice, you're probably not going to get it. So let me explain it to you in the way I explain things. And I still admire Glenn. But Pollock, my first day, my first week, it was just running.
Yeah.
And I kept my uniform always clean, my tie on. And me and Donnie got into it. I thought Donnie Cartret was the best captain to ever work for. I wanted to be exactly like Donnie Cartret.
Yeah.
And the way he talked to inmates, I'm like going, I probably could never do that, but I want to be just like him.
Sure.
I thought he was just awesome. The FCI was where I was used to running. I felt more comfortable at the FCI than I did at any other place. Sure. And I could run that. I mean, I could tell everybody go home, and I thought I could run it. That's how confident I was. And then we had a major disturbance on January the 13th, and it changed everything.
What year?
2013.
Okay.
And it was I didn't think I was coming home. I was actually, praying, saying, "Dear Lord, please, at least let me get through this. Don't let me die too bad."
That was at the FCI or at the pen?
That was the FCI.
Okay. Tell me about that.
600 Hispanics decided they wanted to kill each other. Their thing was they were not going to hurt staff. I don't know how that works, but 600 inmates said, "Okay, we're going to kill each other, but we're not going to kill staff or hurt staff."
Right.
We agree on that. And I remember we had just ordered, it was a Sunday, and we ordered pizza for everybody, me and my activities lieutenant. And the pizza just got there, and we had took around to the staff members and said, "Hey, appreciate you all for coming in, doing a good job." And that's what we did as a lieutenant.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys did that where you worked at, but that was the thing. We took care of staff on Sundays or holidays or whatever the case may be. But we did that. We cooked out for them. But anyways, back to the disturbance. So recreation calls and says, "Hey, we got some Hispanics grouping up." So I said, "Okay." So me and another officer, Dakota, he just passed away not too long ago. I couldn't believe that. But so we walk out there in the rec yard, and Brian Hunt was my compound officer. And yeah, inmates they were kind of grouped up. So we went up to him, and they were saying, "Hey, Lieutenant, everything's good." I mean, right away, I'm like going, "Well, I didn't even ask you anything." So Dakota talked to him. He spoke fluent Spanish, and Dakota was saying, "Hey, they just had some, issues with certain inmates. They're trying to figure out, when they're going to bring them up to the lieutenant's office, to avoid any kind of confrontation and all that stuff. Who's going to go up, when they're going to come up." I'm like going, "Okay." So we wound up the next group. And it was always the same thing. "Hey, everything's good. So we walked around the soccer field, which there's probably 300 of those inmates playing soccer. They love soccer. And so we come back around, and I asked one more time. I said, "Everything's good." And these Hispanics that were there, they were a couple of the leaders. They were like going, "Everything's good, Lieutenant. Everything's good. You don't have to worry about your staff." And I should have caught it right there.
Yeah.
When he said, "I don't have to worry about my staff." So as I'm walking out, I get to the metal detector as you come into recreation, and the rec officer calls, got a fight, got multiple fights. And then boom, it just went crazy. I mean, you were holding on to the fences, inmates are running by you, and you're trying to grab inmates, throw them to the ground, and then we got some munitions in there, got some flashbangs, and it felt like it took days to me, and probably other officers, to say, "Hey, it's over with." But I think it was just a couple hours. And we got all the inmates in flex cuffs. They're all on the soccer field. I think we had 8 ambulances out front taking inmates to the hospital.
Did they just wear themselves out, or were there decisions that you guys made at that time that actually quelled that, caused them to stop and separate, or was it going on for so long that they got what they wanted done, so they quit?
I think it was a little bit of all three. I think it was they were getting tired, and they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, and then with the strength of force that we were showing, it stopped. The use of force that we had, with the flashbangs, we stopped a lot of inmates we contained a lot of inmates from coming off the soccer field. So we actually stopped that from more inmates going into where, because that happened on the handball court. And so we have a fence in between the soccer field. Then you got a fence that comes kind of like this, to where this is the basketball court, and then this is the handball court, and you got like a vestibule that comes up. But then there's the soccer field. So all those, we started locking the basketball court up first, because there was nobody over there except some white kids and a couple of black guys playing basketball and bocce ball. But we stopped all those inmates coming off the soccer field, and we were PEPPERBALL launchers. We had gas. We were just throwing everything we had. We went through a lot of stuff.
Right.
And finally, and I remember calling on my radio, because I didn't know. This was crazy. I'm like, "Control, we need more staff. And I remember the control officer going, Lieutenant Allen, deep breath. And I remember hearing it in my head when she said, deep breath. She says, they're on the way. And she was so calm.
Nice.
And she was like, and she was telling me to calm down. And I actually, when she said that to me, I took that deep breath and I'm like going, all right, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Staff are coming. Staff are coming. And I remember it got all over with, and out of the whole incident, we had a staff member, he was running from food service and tripped.
Right.
Before he even hit the rack yard and hurt his ankle. And then another staff member, he got lit up with PEPPERBALL.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who had the PEPPERBALL gun. I mean, I might have had it at one time, but he got lit up on the side of the legs, and so that was really the only injuries that we had. No, I think an officer he got hit by a bocce ball in the shoulder, but those were the only injuries that we had.
Right.
I would say 5 staff, maybe out of that 5 staff, 2 of them were actually, hit by an inmate.
Sure.
But I think it was more like, get out of the way. We don't want you involved. I'm trying to get that inmate right there. So it was and I felt good about it. I'm like going, okay, I'm still, 100%. I didn't get no staff hurt or killed during my watch.
Yep.
And that was my goal. And that was something that Teddy Moscar and, Ty Rule, they taught me that. They said, go in there and make sure your staff go home. You do what you got to do. Take care of your staff, most importantly, and it's one of those things where we as lieutenants, supervisors, we get promoted. And I think what Eichenbaum, we talked about earlier with him saying, you got to go somewhere else. I think what it is sometimes we forget where we came from. And we're on that buddy system if we're at the same institution. Whereas if we're somewhere else, you don't know how I do things. I'm not, I don't hang out with you, in the dorms and, play cards and all that stuff. Right. But the thing is, it's always, we forget where we came from, and we forget that we're now supervisors, but we also have to be leaders in that same aspect. We can't just be a supervisor. We have to lead by example. Sure. And we had just had this discussion a couple days ago at New Hanover. And it was that thing to where, you got to stop being a supervisor. You got to be a leader. And this is in the sergeant's office, explaining to them people. And they're like, well, what do you, I said, you don't even know what I know. I said, but I'm trying to tell you right now that, there's a difference between being a supervisor and being a leader. I said, sure. If you want those, you got those bars, you got those sergeant stripes because you wanted power, so be it. But you'll never gain the respect of those officers. And that day on that rec yard, when that disturbance happened, officers were coming up saying, hey, thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you, Lieutenant. Yeah. And, that meant more to me than anything else in my career, that you have officers saying, hey, where are you going next quarter? Are you going to mornings? Are you going to days? And staff wanting to follow you. That's what makes you a good leader.
Leadership.
And, after that day, it seemed like that's what it was. Everybody wanted to go, where I was going, but you had your few that said, hey, I'd rather go because every time Alan has a post, we have a disturbance. I'm like, what? It happened one time. Come on, man. But then they sent me back to the FCI after, a few changes. The inmates were escaping from the camp over there at Pollock. And so they said, we need a lieutenant over there. Just make your, the executive officer at the time, she's like, I want a lieutenant. I want him assigned to the camp. And I remember going to the camp, and they said, just make your own, schedule. They said, maybe work a couple of days nights, a couple of days evenings, a couple of days during the, morning. So that way the inmate doesn't know when you're going to be there. So I had my own office, and I'd go in there and I'd work with the officers and everything. And then they sent me back to the USP, which I thought was like, thank you. I'm going back to USP, because I want to be a captain. And I said, I need that USP experience. I need to get the rest of that USP in. And then, of course, I watch your podcast, well, listen to your podcast, and
Sure.
I think what you do is great.
I appreciate that.
And, so I end my career at Poly. I retired.
Okay.
And I had a great career. I couldn't get back home because all these, 18 months or, that I have to do before I could do anything.
Sure.
So I get back home, I retire, and I go back to North Carolina, and I'm sitting on the beach for 6 months, enjoying life, and everybody's dying. Everybody's committing suicide. They're
When you
they're
say
having all,
everybody, you mean people
yeah,
you've worked with?
people I work for, people that retired, even
Yeah.
even people I don't know,
Right.
So I started looking at it, and they tell us that our average life expectancy is 3 years after we retire.
Right.
And I'm like going, man, I gotta go back to prison. And my wife's like going, you gotta do what? I said, I gotta go back to prison. I said, I can't. I don't want to die.
Right.
And she's like going, what are you talking about? So I showed her the emails, and she's like, well, go work at Walmart, go work at Home Depot, Lowe's, something. I said,
Right.
I don't know how to react. I mean,
Right.
if somebody talks to me in a derogative way, or if someone, I can't explain it to her. And so I tell her, I'm like going, I gotta go back to prison.
Yeah. Because that's where
And I
you're
said,
comfortable.
yep, it's all I know how to do.
Yeah.
In this job, and I was we were talking about stress and everything else. Back in 2017, Captain John Birmingham was there,
Mm-hmm.
and Lieutenant Oscar Mack, he I think he's a warden now too. Those were probably Oscar Mack is my mentor. He's the
Yeah.
one that taught me how to be a real lieutenant, and
Okay.
I admire him today.
Mm-hmm.
He's just everything. And I remember the stress got me, and I remember that me and my wife got into this huge fight because she was still living in North Carolina. And she goes, I'm tired of being away from you, because we've been separated away from each other for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
She didn't move with me to Louisiana. She stayed in North Carolina. And I was just flying home all the time. And it got old and old. And we just got this big, huge fight. And I was thinking to myself going, you know what? I'm done.
Hmm.
And I had it all planned out. And I planned that, I was going to go to work, get all my paperwork done, make sure everything was ready for the lieutenant when he come in.
Right.
And I remember that I was going to go sign the books in the mobiles, and then I was going to the armory.
Hmm.
And so I went out. I remember get all my paperwork done. I hadn't turned my computer on yet, and I went outside to do the mobiles, because in my mind I kept thinking, going, "You got to do it now. You got to do it now, because you're going to change your mind. Something's going to happen." And control calls me and says, "Hey, you got a phone call." So I go to the front lobby. I answer the phone call, and it's John Birmingham. He's like, "Oh, hey, Lieutenant Allen, have you checked your email yet?" And I said, "No, sir." I said, "I haven't." He says, "Check your email." He says, "Make sure this stuff gets passed on to your employees." And I'm like going, okay. So I go back out into my office, go back to the Sally Port, and it's on suicide.
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah, tell me.
Wow.
So I'm reading the email. I'm like going, okay, it's Suicide Awareness Month. Talk to your staff, tell them the red flags, tell them everything. So I tell control, give me a conference call. So we're going through the conference call, and I'm talking, and nobody's saying a word.
Right.
It's just everything. To me, I don't know what I said. Everything was coming out.
Ah.
And so I hung up the phone, and I said, all right, now I'm going armory. Because I was frustrated at the same time, because everything was coming out.
Right.
Phones were ringing off the hook. Hey, LT, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Hey, man, how about you come back around? We sit and talk. I'm like going, I'll make around later. They're like, nah,
They
man,
knew
come on.
something. They knew
Come make
something was
around.
up.
Yep, exactly. I said, I'll make around later. I said, I appreciate you, though.
Yeah.
So I get up out of the desk. I go to the Sally Port, and Stephen DeSales, He's my control officer. He says, can't let you out. I said, what do you mean you can't let me out? I said, you know I'm the operations lieutenant. He said, man, I don't care who you are. He said, I'm not letting you out. He's like this. He says, we'll take care of the armory later. I said, well, I got a company to do count. He says, I'm a big boy. He says, I've been doing this a long time. He says, I'll do count. You don't have to worry about it. He said, I'll put your name on it.
Yeah.
I said, you know this is bullshit, right? And he's like, it is what it is, Alan. Go make some rounds, man. Go talk to them staff.
Right.
So I went around and I made about halfway around and talking to staff and staff saying, hey, you okay, Alan? You all right? And it was not lieutenant anymore. It was like Alan was on a personal basis. I said, why y'all asking me if I'm okay? I'm good. They said, well, you sound kind of, this and that. And then I hear Lieutenant Mack to Lieutenant Allen. I said, go ahead, Lieutenant. He's like, hey, 25, the operations office. So I go to the office, and him and Birmingham are in there. The cells called them immediately.
Huh.
And they were like, what's going on? And I just broke down. And Captain Birmingham goes, all right, look, here's the deal. He says, let's get online. And he got me a plane ticket and drove me to the airport. And Max like going, you ever think something stupid like that again? You don't have to worry about going to the armory.
Wow.
And I was like, it's just the stress of this job, this everything that around you does to you. And so after that, I became a really big advocate on the suicide watch. I mean, suicide prevention and everything else, and I stress it every single day. Know the people you work with, know the red flags, know if they come in all the time joking and, smoking, and now all of a sudden they're quiet today. Pull them aside, see if they're all right. I say, even at home, and I tell this all the time just because of this incident. And if it hadn't been for Birmingham, if it hadn't been for, Mac, hadn't been for Stephen DeSales, the control officer, who knows? I might have chickened out at the end, but it was a bad time. So it was the stress that this job does to us. It's unbelievable. And a lot of people, and like I said, so when I was sitting on the beach that day, I'm like going, I gotta go back to prison. I'm not gonna, sit here and then have a heart attack or anything else. So my wife's like, so we're going back to Louisiana? I said, heck no, we're not going back to Louisiana. I said, you know what? I said, I got an idea. I'm going to end my career where I started my career.
Yeah.
So I called up and I said, hey, look, I want to apply to the state prison, but I want to come as a lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
And the state prison's like, North Carolina is like going, you must be out of your mind. You can't just come to state as a lieutenant. You're going to have to work your way as an officer all the way back up.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, I got the experience. And so I sent the prerequisites of a GS-9 lieutenant and a GS-11 lieutenant. And they came back and they said, oh, my God, you qualify. But there's no lieutenant positions at New Hanover.
Yeah.
There's a sergeant position. So I applied for it. And they said, well, come in as an officer, go to school. And as soon as your school gets done, we'll promote you to sergeant, which they did.
Right.
And I've been a sergeant since. So I'm working on I started back as a sergeant at the state in March of 2022. So I'll be going on 2 years now back at the state.
So when you went back to the state, did it feel right? Did you feel more comfortable? Did you feel relief going back to work in corrections?
I did. I mean, that sense of, I think at first my head was filled with all the knowledge that I had from the Bureau.
Right.
That, I'm like going, hey, I'm going to make a big difference to come back to the state. These guys are, still in, the caveman days,
Yeah.
So I felt really comfortable coming back, and then it seemed like I was hitting a brick wall every single time I turned the corner where I'd go, hey, how come y'all ain't doing this?
Yeah.
They're like going, because we've always been doing this, nobody wants change. Nobody wants this and that. And so for, that first 5 months I was working, I had to work this backyard, and they said that I couldn't be around inmates because I wasn't certified. And I was sitting there thinking to myself going, You're kidding, right? I mean, I just spent 20, almost 21 years in the bureau. I got 6 years with you guys, and now I'm not certified. They said nope. They said, you got to go back to school. I mean, I got OC on. I can't carry a baton because that's what the state has. State has OC and they have batons.
Yep.
And so I was like going, I can't work around inmates. I said, but I got 200 inmates walking this backyard, walking past me every single day. And they're like going, yeah, but you can't be around inmates. So like, whatever. So, I'm like going, I'm starting to hate this job again, I'm like, God. So I said, there's a work release building that's only got 9 inmates in there. Those are janitors. I can't go in there and work. They said, nope. I can't work the gatehouse. Nope. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I go to school, I graduate, and then I'm thinking to myself going, hey, I got all this knowledge. I'm going to be top of my class, State policy and bureau policy are totally different. It's kind of the same, but it's not. And so what I was thinking was right is wrong. And I'm like going, okay, well, let me adjust everything. And, I wasn't at the bottom. I was probably I think we had 15 people in there. I was probably number 3, but I had the experience and the instructors thought that was great that, they thought that me coming back, because they talked to me. They said, why would you do that? I'm like going, dude, I don't know what else to do. And they said, well, good luck, and they even said, we think you'll be a great asset. So I come back and boom, a week later, I get my sergeant stripes. And now I think I got a little bit more say so in the matter, but it's still a no. I mean, I've gone in there and said, hey, warden, I'm not trying to invent the wheel or change the style of the wheel, but maybe this will help. And the warden's right going, this ain't the bureau, Alan.
Yeah.
You're not a lieutenant no more. And I'm like going, but I think it'll help. Right now, it ain't gonna help. And then this last year, everybody's been getting ACA accredited.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came back and they're like going, okay, you need chits to check out equipment with, which they didn't have. They were just giving people keys and saying, here you go. And then wondering where the keys are at. Who's got these keys? Who's got those handcuffs? Who's got this? And I'm like going, and I said it when I first got there. I said, y'all need to have a chit system to put on there. Well, ACA came back and said, hey, y'all got to start using chits.
Sure.
So I'm like going, see? So some of the stuff I tell y'all makes sense.
Yeah.
And they're like going, Alan, come on. I'm like, look, I can make you a whole list right now what we need fixed. I said, because I did program review.
Right.
As a GS-11 lieutenant, we did that stuff. We prepared for ACA, for OSHA. Yep. And so I said, I know what I'm doing. I said, they sent us to Denver, Colorado to do this stuff. I said, I've taken the classes. And they're like going, all right, well, maybe you could just submit some paperwork and we'll see where it goes. And I'm like, God. So ACA's we still haven't been accredited. There's some things that, we need to do to get that accreditation. But the chit system is now in effect. They got little plastic ones, that I'm like going, nah, you gotta have these metal ones. They're like going, come on, man. You already told us we need chits. We went this far, we'll order some new ones. I said, all right, well, I'm just trying to tell you, these plastic ones get broken or this and that. Get a solid metal chit. Yeah. And I carry mine with me that I got from the bureau. And they're like going, what are those? I said, these are real chits. Yeah. These have my name on it. So you'll know if I have equipment. And so it's a different beast.
Sure. But, well, it's good. So you're still working there. You're comfortable there. How are you doing mentally? How are you feeling? How's your mental wellness? Have you came around and understood some of what was going on with yourself back then? And
yeah, me and my wife at the time, we're actually divorced now, and I got a new lady in my life, and she's just wonderful, and she keeps me going. You know, she's got two kids. You know, I think you saw CJ come in here a minute ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
He plays football. He wrestles. Kate, and she just left for college. She's nearing, I think, she started in August, you know, so she's been in college. She's home for, you know, that Christmas break.
Nice.
She's doing really, really good. She's going to be a nurse.
Cool.
But my mom and dad, they live right down the road. And my dad, every time I come home and I talk, he wants to talk corrections, but at the same time, he don't want to hear nothing about corrections.
Right.
You know, I'm like going, well, damn, why'd you bring it up?
So when you were having some of that stress going on and you were dealing with some of that, did you feel like you could go to him and that he would understand after being in it for all those years? Or I don't know. I mean, I've never dealt with that in my own life.
To me, you know, I wanted to talk, but I think, you know, if I had said something to my dad would have drove off the Pollock and ended my career right there.
Yeah. Yeah. We do get very comfortable talking with the people around us. They become a family.
They do.
You know. Yeah.
And you know, like I felt comfortable talking to, you know, Mr. Beeler. You know, you look at my past. You know, Warden Wool. You know now, Ty. You know, I felt comfortable talking to him, but at the time, it just seemed like, are they too busy to talk to me, or I felt as if I had made that phone call, you know, and said, I'm going through a problem, they probably would have stopped doing exactly what they were doing and said, hey, look, I'm on my way. Yep. And I think at the time, Ty was in Miami, or he might have been, I think he was in Miami at the time. He was a warden down there. I think with Mac, you know, and that's why I think Mac was so mad at me. Oscar was like going, why didn't you pick up the phone and call me? You know, we'd have talked. John Birmingham, he was the same way. Me and him talked as he got me home, and he's like, "Are you sure you're gonna be all right?" I said, "I'm fine." He said, "Well, let's get you on this plane."
It's an interesting viewpoint that I think you need to, and we're talking about this, and there's other people that are going to want to hear it. But the fact that you thought that they were too busy, or that you know, you didn't want to interrupt what was going on with them. Yet I know those guys, and you're right. They would have absolutely, you know, drove right there if that's what you needed.
Yeah.
And so would 100 other people probably. Some of them that you don't even think about would have done that. So I don't know how we get that, because you're not the only one I've ever talked to that says that. You know, I wanted to keep it to myself. I didn't want it to become somebody else's problem. I didn't want, you know, to interrupt their life. And it's not an interruption of anybody else's life. It wouldn't be if I called you tomorrow and said, hey, I'm feeling this way. You know, you would absolutely take your time to talk to me or listen to me, or whatever it is I needed. And so how do we get that out there? How do we let each other know that phone call is sometimes all it takes?
Yeah, you know, and I think about it. You know, you've had all this experience in the Bureau, and, you know, we have our ARTs, and I think that, you know, we should stress more on that, you know, to staff. You know, maybe, you know, like, you know, the podcast now, you know, me saying what I said, you know, it'll bring others out to say, hey, you know what? I had the same experience, you know, but I actually talked to somebody, you know, and the thing is that if you look back at it, I did talk to people. I had a conference call, and I'm explaining, hey, look, it's Suicide, you know, Awareness Month. You know, we got to be aware of our red flags. And then I'll remember anything else as I'm talking. And it's those staff that said, you know, because everybody, like I said, everybody got quiet and there was nothing. I said, all right, y'all have a good shift. I'll see you and want to see you. And I hung up the phone, and boom, phone started ringing. You know, hey, you all right? You all right? You all right? So in a way, I did ask for help. But at the same time, I mean, I'm like going, I didn't realize it. It wasn't like I said, hey, I need help. Can you guys, you know, give me a call? You know, but I think like we had Warren Holland. He was he worked in the Bureau, and he was at the state when I got there. And I was still an officer, and we had run into each other a couple times. And he committed suicide at his house.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to go over, the weekend prior, and I had something come up. I mean, I had him say, "Hey, man," I said, "I ain't gonna be able to make it over the house," and he was just having a little cookout, and at the time, nobody knew.
Right.
And I go to work, and they say, Officer Howland committed suicide last night. Took his life. And I'm like going, "Oh my God!"
Yeah. Yeah.
I
know.
And he didn't put no signs out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And the sad thing is, I probably, if I think back on it, I have known maybe as many as 20, but at least 15 staff over my 30 years in corrections who've committed suicide. That's crazy,
Well, we had a rec officer. We were doing ACA, and he came in to do. He was a rec supervisor, and I won't say his name. He was rec supervisor, and he came in, cleared all ACA. They passed. He started his drive home, pulled over on the side of the road, and shot himself.
Yeah.
Had gotten a letter from the warden, a letter for his wife, and then there was, like you said, there's probably about 10 other ones that I remember. I don't know which prison it was, but a mobile. He got in his vehicle and drove around the corner of the perimeter, shot himself.
Sure.
And you hear all this, and he did it on a day that the firing range was open, that they were doing ART. So the other mobile didn't even realize.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just kept going by. Then finally went up and said, "Hey, man, I need a break."
And it's interesting how many people, including, you were thinking about it at work, that have actually come into work to do that. And is that because that's where we feel comfortable? I don't know, but it has happened a lot over my career. So
yeah, I mean, you think about it. All of us, even off the suicide thing, is the fact that sometimes I go to work just because I'm comfortable. I don't want to. I'm bored at the house, so like now we're so short staffed. On Christmas Eve, it was just me and 3 officers watching 400 inmates.
Wow.
So we're so short staffed at the prison right now, and there's only 1 sergeant, and on night shift we have 3 sergeants. And I told somebody the other day, I said, you know what, we really need to put this out. And I don't know how many North Carolina State employees watch our podcast, but we're all short all over the state of North Carolina, and they're closing buildings down to where they're having less inmates, or they're closing some institutions down, saying, "Hey, we don't have enough staff to do this."
Yeah.
And if you stay, the officer's mentality today, not talking bad about these guys, but in our day, we sucked it up. We stayed over a couple hours and we were back on our shift, in 6 hours. These guys here, they have to stay over an hour. They're going to take the rest of the day off, the next day off. Or they're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to be about 3 hours late." I'm like going, the beginning of the shift is the worst part of it.
Yeah.
So I need you here for the beginning of the shift. If you want to take off at the end of the shift, so be it. Go ahead. And we've said it over and over again that, this is crazy, that it's going to take somebody to get hurt for somebody to actually realize that we're this short.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to hear it, but it's all over the state. I mean, I was just looking at
it's all over
the Bureau.
The country.
I heard the Bureau, "Hey, look, we're offering this, we're offering that." And we got people that they apply, but they can't pass a drug test, or they can't pass, their psychological, or they find out that they got to work 12-hour shifts, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not doing that," and they stop the process right there. They never show up. But the officers that we have.
I got an email the other day, and I always get emails from people either, looking to go into corrections or rookies. And I got one from a lady who was looking to go into corrections, and she wanted me to tell her how she could go into corrections but not have to work directly with inmates. I don't have an answer for that. You
Nope.
know, corrections is working with inmates. That's what we do. So,
Yeah, it is. And I wrote a book, that sometimes I'm afraid to publish because of the stuff that I said in it. Um, but it's the truth, and I get a lot of stuff from like Corrections One, you know,
yeah,
um, and there's a lot of good, authors out there, and former officers that tell it how it is. And I used to
sure.
use that in my conference calls to tell officers, hey, don't poke the bear,
Yeah,
officer safety first, um, and that was one of the things. You make this job the way you make the job. Don't be like me. I'm not going to be like him. We all have to be our own person, but as long as you come in here, give the inmate respect, he'll give it back to you. As long as you're
sure.
firm, fair, consistent, you're gonna make it. Don't go in
Yeah,
there, being an asshole today, and then tomorrow say, "Hey, y'all see the football game last night?"
yeah,
It ain't gonna
I
work
know.
for you. It ain't
Right.
gonna work.
Yeah,
Um, but today's society, today's officers, you know, they want to hear it, but they don't want to hear it.
yeah,
You tell them, say, "Look, man, I wouldn't tell you if I didn't know." But it comes from experience. It comes from what I've seen, the homicides I've seen, the staff assaults that I've seen. Glenn talked about that officer getting, assaulted really bad to where, another lieutenant had to retire. I was there
hmm,
for that. I
yeah,
was there during that thing. I was at the FCI. We were coming out. They said, we have a staff assault at the USP. So, boom, we all get over there. And they were taking them out by ambulance, and I actually took over, helped out take, the rest of the shift with Glenn. And, we worked it, and then, something the Bureau has, the state doesn't have, is we had those crisis management teams that came in to talk with us to say, hey,
sure.
you just went through a horrific, ordeal. Is there anything that we could do to help you?
Mm,
The state doesn't have that.
right.
Um, and we just had an inmate get beat up really bad the other day. And once again, don't have enough staff, so the inmates know where to hit these people. And, it's going to be a little bit before that officer gets there. And then by the time the officer goes in and do his round in that unit, boom, there's this guy laying in the bathroom floor.
Sure.
So seeing pictures of that, it kind of throws back at me like PTSD, saying, well, wait a minute. You know, you thought you left that, at a
Yeah,
penitentiary. Now you're seeing it here. And the inmates know it. The inmates
yeah,
know we're short staffed. They know that, stuff's coming over the fence every night, because
yep.
we don't have the staff to watch it. Um, But that's the only drawback of what I'm at now. I plan to do this for, I think, 2 more years,
Yeah.
you know, and then I'll retire again. And but
Go back to the beach.
yeah, we'll do that and actually try to do what you do. You know,
Yeah,
maybe be an advocate for the state. You know, walk around, go to different places and say, these are my experiences.
sure.
This is what I know. So what can I do to help better you,
Yeah,
in your job, in your training? Um, listen to Glenn, listen to, um, Ty, listen to, Art Beeler, I guess he's an advocate right now for the state.
sure.
He does a lot of that. That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
I'd like to be in that position where I could train staff to be better at what they do.
Well,
To
I
go
think this
over
is
this,
a yeah. I think this is a great step. And I know that you definitely have a story. You have an experience that you're um, get that book written. Get it out there to where you can help some of these people because there's people who are interested in hearing your side of that. And I don't have anything prepared, but in the show notes, I will put a suicide line phone number in there and some information for people that need it. If you're listening to this, go down to the information and click on those show notes, and we'll have some uh, information for you. Uh, but reach out. I mean, that's what saved you, and that people were
yep,
listening was that you had reached out. Um, and I think I think what you want to do with the advocacy is just great. It's needed. And thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for
I
telling your
mean,
story so honestly.
and thank you for listening. I mean, it's one of those things where, like with the EAP, the Play Assistance Program, all this stuff. I think it needs to be more out for people to see instead of just talking about it once a year. Um,
Sure.
like with your podcast, I definitely tell everybody. I say, hey man, you got to listen to this guy. And I'm not just saying it because I'm talking to you right now, but
Appreciate it.
I'm always on Corrections One looking for different things. And I saw your podcast. I'm like, oh hey, what is this? So I clicked
Yeah.
on it and I started scrolling through it, and I'm like, going, hey, I bet these are some interesting, stuff going on. Then I saw Glenn and I saw Mike, and I'm like, going,
Yeah.
oh, I know them. I'm gonna listen to this. So then I started. I've listened to all your podcasts. It was like I think
That's great.
64 of them or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. This will be
Um,
number 73 when it comes out.
so I think I got like 64.
Yeah.
But I've listened to probably 90% then. If I still got
Yeah.
about 10 more to go. But your podcast, Glenn's podcast, I think there should be a way to where we could introduce this to say, hey, go listen to these people talk.
Yeah.
Listen to what Mike has to say. He talks about officer safety. He talks about, working a post, you know, inmate property, stuff like that. Just go through it, listen to him talk. Listen to Glenn talk because Glenn has some good pods.
He does. Yep.
And I've only listened to a few of his. Of course, I
Yep.
listened to him and Bobby talk. Um,
Yeah.
but I've listened to a couple of Glenn's, and it's just so awesome that you got and Mike's out there doing his thing.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's good that we're doing that, and that's kind of like what I want to do. And maybe we need more of that. We need
Yeah.
more, these retirees coming back out and saying, "Hey, look, let me tell you about real corrections. You guys
Yeah.
got it made. You know, all you guys got to do is come in here and you're glorified babysitters. That's all you are. Just answer questions, make sure the inmates doing what they're supposed to do, and get them out the door to work release, and
Yeah.
bam, make sure they go eat, make sure they come back, make sure they clean their stuff up. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Make it. With the experience that we all have, we've seen it go from 0 to 60 in a drop of a dime. But I think that's what we need more of. Like you adding the suicide, line. That's great. I
Yep.
mean, it's awesome that just little things that we learn and listen to, we could take and make it a better, you know, um, issue. And
Absolutely.
hopefully, with this ACA going on, I keep taking the state back on, hey, here's some look, these are audits that I did. Everything that you got right here, you see where it says ACA and it's got a number? Those are ACA accreditation.
Yeah.
So maybe
Oh, you're good.
they'll look at that and go, hey, but this was great talking to you, and I'm glad that I was able to see your podcast and
Yeah.
actually want to sit there and talk to you about different things.
Oh, it's been a great conversation. I appreciate it a lot. I want to see you get to work on that book. I want
I mean,
to. I want to read them stories
it's
you got. So
it's like this is
there you
just a
go.
couple pages that I took away. I think it's like this thick.
Yeah. So
Um, but
thank you. Yeah, thank you
yeah.
so much for being on here, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future. It's good
Oh yes,
talking to
sir.
you, Bama.
Thank you, man.
Have a great day.
You too.
Before we go today, I'd like to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors. OMNI Real-Time Locating Systems is a company that I've been working closely with. I'm proud to be part of this innovative team that has developed the best real-time locating system on the market for your jail or prison. OMNI's PREA-compliant real-time monitoring technology is the very best way to track and record the locations and interactions of all inmates and assets through every inch of your correctional facility. Imagine getting an alarm the second an escape happens, or being able to send a medical response the second an inmate's heart rate drops. To learn more about OMNI, go to www.omnirtls.com. That's www.omnirtls.com. OMNI Real-Time Locating System is the powerful tool designed specially for today's modern correctional facilities. If you haven't done so, please take a moment to like my podcast, or better yet, hit the subscribe button down there so that you'll be notified when the next episode comes out. Have a great day.